Go. Okay. Good morning. If you don't know me, my name is Elizabeth Mon. I'm the Director of Fine Arts for the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And today our session is going to be led by Katie Wonderly. And Katie is an elementary music teacher for Putnam City Public Schools at Two Lakes Elementary. I almost blanked out on the name of it. And my goal in starting all these sessions this week was not necessarily to find answers for any of us, but maybe review what folks did at the end of the year and then see if we can brainstorm some ideas and come up with thoughts for next year, because none of us knows what it will look like, but we do know that it will be very different from anything that you've experienced so far in your teaching career. So Katie is going to share her screen and take it away. At the end of the session, we'll have time for questions, so jot anything down that you see along the way and prepare to ask at the end. Go ahead, Katie.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody. I want to start off by saying this presentation will be made available to you after it's all over. So if you missed something in the notes, you will have access to this presentation and all of the links after. I naturally am a person that talks very fast, especially when I get excited. So I'm going to try to slow it down for you. But if I go too fast, just know that all of that information will be available to you after we're all done with this presentation. So like Elizabeth said, we're taking a dive into my distance learning experience, the things that I did at the end of this school year, and then taking a look moving forward, what are some options we might have for the fall. So keep in mind, I came into this kind of part of our teaching at an advantage. I very much grew up surrounded by technology. My dad was a computer programmer. I had a lot of experience using technology and thriving with technology. So I came into it with a lot of experience and kind of took the crazy route to do all of these technically advanced things just because I had that experience. But keep in mind, the things that I'm telling you about today, there is always an easier way to do it. And I will try to throw some of those in throughout, and we'll be happy to answer any more questions as we go. But just know that this is kind of the more complicated way to do things, but there are easier ways to handle it as well. But I wanted to share my experience with you. So let's talk about our time. 3 months ago, well, actually first, let's tell me about me first. I'm a fifth year, going into my 5th year of teaching at Two Lakes Elementary School in Putnam City Schools, and I was recently named the Putnam City District Teacher of the Year. My school is pre-K through 5th grade. I have around 650 students that I typically see on a 5-day rotation, of course, when we're not away from the classroom. And I see them for about 55 minutes once a week. Something interesting to note is that our district is a one-to-one iPad district. However, there's an asterisk there because those iPads were not distributed to our students during their distance learning time. So the only access they had to technology was what was already in their home. They did not distribute those iPads, and I'm not sure what that will look like moving into the fall if we end up back in distance learning. We haven't really been communicated with on whether or not our students will have access to that technology. So that's just a little bit of background about where I come from and the students that I teach. Let's talk about this distance learning time. All of us were told it was time for spring break, and immediately all of the plans that I had for spring break were canceled, and I found myself home by myself on my couch figuring out what was I going to do? How was I going to handle this? I am very active on social media, so I saw a lot of music teachers all over the country that were not just preparing for spring break, but were preparing to teach directly on that next Monday. How are they going to handle distance learning the very next week? And so I was surrounded by teachers who were doing a lot of those things and felt kind of a nudge for myself to figure out and kind of get a game plan on how I was going to handle that. So also something to note is that I don't do really well when I feel out of control. And we really had no control over what was going to happen. We knew that we had that 3-week spring break, but I didn't really know how I was going to be able to do really much of anything. So I found the things that I could control. First was my kitchen. I stocked it with all sorts of food because I just didn't know how that was going to handle. And then the second was I decided that I really wanted to find a way to bring music to my students. And so some things I had to do. I set expectations for myself. I immediately adjusted those expectations, realizing that it was really hard to know what to expect during this time. And like I said, I dove into social media and was surrounded by all of these teachers who were already doing the work, who had already started planning some of these lessons for their students and kind of gathered what they had been doing and decided how I wanted to make that fit for my situation. I watched a lot of webinars. There was a lot of great teachers sharing their wealth of knowledge at the beginning of all of this that I gathered from. And then I made a game plan for myself. And so I decided that I wanted to figure out how to bring music to my students. Something interesting to note as well is at this point, our school did not have any kind of full communication system in place. We had the all-call system where the secretary could call the all-call and they would send parents either a voicemail or an email, but we didn't have any kind of system in place where teachers could directly communicate with all of the students. So I had to figure out how was I going to let parents know that these music classes or this experience was happening when we didn't have that system in place just yet. And so I ended up turning to Facebook. I am, like I said, very active on social media. I have a public teacher page on Facebook and Instagram. And luckily for me, because I had already cultivated that following, a lot of the parents of my students were already on those pages and knew where they could access me during this time. So because of that, I decided that Facebook Live was the way to go. I wanted to offer a 1 day a week music class for an hour where students could just come and make music and we could experience that time together. But as I'm doing that, there were some things that I had to think about. First was, how was I going to work around those copyright laws, right? This is not a private Facebook class. This is a public. And there are issues that come along with dealing with music and books and all of those things publicly. Then I had to think about how was I going to film and assemble that video. I had to think about how I was going to stream the lesson live to Facebook, and then what content was important or accessible to students, right? I wasn't teaching one class for each grade level. I was teaching one class for all of my students. And what content was I going to be able to teach or use during this time via this different medium? And then finally, how was I going to make sure my students are watching? And the answer to that is I really couldn't. I couldn't make sure that they were watching. All I could do was continue to promote it and hope that they would catch on. And many of them did, which I'll share with you in a few minutes. So that first thing that I had to deal with was copyright. How was I going to get around these copyright issues that were already in place? And the first thing I had to think about were the books I wanted to share. And luckily for teachers all over, there were a ton of publishers that very immediately sent out these releases that allowed teachers to share their books with their students during this time. I put a QR code there in the corner, which will be available on the slides after, and that is to the document that I continue to use that someone put together that has all of the publisher's releases all in one place, and they continued to update it throughout the time. So you always had the most recent release from whichever publishers. And some publishers allowed for public use. They allowed it to be shared on Facebook and YouTube, and some only allowed private use. So I made sure that all of the books that I was reading to my students over our videos were only the ones that allowed public releases. So I didn't reach out to publishers personally, I just used those releases that were already in place. Something else to note is that many of those releases had an end date of June 30th. I have not seen any publishers adjust that just yet for the fall. I'm not sure what that will look like moving forward. Many said that they would continue to adjust it if the distance learning continued, but I have not seen that release just yet. So that's something to note as we move into the fall. Second, any of the songs that I sang, I made sure that they were the folk songs that were covered under that general public domain. I did, however, include a couple recordings of songs that I used with my students, and I reached out directly to those recording artists and their companies to get permission for that. And that's something that I would encourage you to do as well if you're choosing to share things publicly. A lot of people were feeling incredibly generous during this time, and I got responses almost immediately from people like Timbaland and some other recording artists that were just more than willing to share their music with me so I could share with my students. And then finally, I wanted to include videos in these lessons, and that's because a lot of times my students will use brain breaks like Go Noodle and Cuckoo Kangaroo and those dance along videos, and I wanted our class, that time together, to be as similar to our time in my class as I could. And so I wanted to include some of those videos. And so I just reached directly out to those YouTube creators, those YouTube channels, and they, again, sent back permission. Now, I didn't receive yeses from everyone, but I only included the content who I did receive permission from. The second thing I had to consider was all the equipment that I was going to use. I did most of my streaming and editing from my iPad Pro, and that simply was because I had it available to me, but also because my MacBook Pro, my computer at the time, was 10 years old. At the beginning of this, I had a computer that was running about half speed. It had not a whole lot of storage left. I had a not great microphone, a not great speaker, and it was just not I was not able to do the kind of streaming and video editing that I really desired to do from my computer. So I ended up doing a lot of it on my iPad, which was very helpful. And I'm going to talk about those specific apps I used in just a second. But I did use my MacBook Pro for what I could for editing using the programs iMovie and Final Cut Pro. And then I used Photoshop to edit all of the graphics that I used inside my videos. For a microphone, I purchased the Blue Snowball microphone, which is what you see pictured right here. And I ended up actually not using that as much as I thought I would. Now, I did use it in the beginning because, like I said, my computer did not have a great microphone on it. And so I was able to plug it directly into my computer, and I didn't have to install any programs. You just plug it in and you can use it. And it has a really great quality to it. However, I did also start really, because again, my computer was old, I had a really higher quality camera on my phone. And so in order to do video recording on my phone, I was able to use the USB to Lightning adapter, which is then takes that USB cable and you can plug it directly into your phone, and your phone can now use that microphone in it as well, which really helps, especially if you're recording music. You know, our iPhone, they really have really great quality cameras, but sometimes those microphones can get overrun by your voice or whatever instrument that you're using. So I really enjoyed being able to plug that directly into my phone to use it as well. And then I also could not live without my iPhone tripod, which is what you see right here. These are actually my outline for my lesson attached to it. But I was able, you know, I live by myself. I don't have anybody here to record it for me. And so by having that iPhone tripod, I was able to put my iPhone on there, hit record, and then just go, and was able to do it all by myself from my living room. And then I didn't have this while I was filming these videos, but I've recently purchased it. A ring light is really great for those situations where you don't have really great lighting. I was lucky enough that my living room had really great natural light, and so I didn't really need that. But when I'm sitting right here in my dining room, I'm actually using that ring light right now. And so you can see that it's kind of evening out all of the shadows. If I turn it off, it's still not a terrible quality, but if you're really looking for some higher quality video and want to make sure that there's not all of these shadows, a ring light really helps with that. So then it was time to record. I had everything together, but I wanted to make sure that I could set up my classroom space. And I was lucky enough, when I heard that we were going on a 3-week spring break, again, I talked about how I panicked very quickly, and I tried to find the things that I could control. And one of the things that I could control was my swipe card to get into the building. And so day 1 of spring break, I went straight to my building. I grabbed as many books as I could, as many of the random decorations. I think I grabbed almost one of every auxiliary instrument that I had, and I brought it all home because I knew that I was gonna do something from home. I didn't know what exactly it was gonna look like. And luckily I did, because then just a couple days later, Putnam City shut down all of our key cards, and we didn't end up being able to get back in until like the end of May. So I really lucked out that I, for once, my craziness benefited me. I was able to bring all of those things home and have some things to use in my as my classroom at home. So I set up a space around my piano at my house. I planned the lesson for the week. I made sure I had the proper permissions in place. I gathered all of the supplies I would need for that specific lesson, and then it was time to go live. But how was I going to do that? Like I said, I used my iPad for a lot of this, and there was a free app on the iPad called Live Air Action. And what's really great about this app is that, one, it's free, but that you can also pay to have different add-ons to it. And the one add-on that I would definitely recommend purchasing is the record function. So I could just sit down and use this app to stream live to Facebook. It would save to Facebook, and that's great. But the record function is great for 2 reasons. One, it records at a higher quality than what you would then download from Facebook. But also, you can pre-record everything from the app without going live and stream it later. So if you want to use some of the other features of this app, you can do that ahead of time without the pressure of being live in that moment. So one of the things that I like about this app is that you can use it to mix live video with pre-recorded sources. And so I can take all of those videos that I use in my class, those Go Noodle videos or the Cuckoo Kangaroo. I also ended up pre-recording my story times because I just needed a break of time to breathe in the lesson, as we all do. And so I pre-recorded all of my story times. And so that way I could start live with the students. We would sing our welcome songs, and then I could click on the function below, and it would pull up the new video, and I could take a breather for a second while it played a pre-recorded video on the live stream. Another great thing is that you can use your iPhone as a video source. So like I said, I had my iPhone tripod up there. So that way I could keep my iPhone at a distance where you could see the whole classroom, but I could use my iPad to control all of the different sources that were happening. Now, I will say this is not the most user-friendly app in the world, but it is free, and so it is definitely worth exploring if this is something that you were interested in doing. I wanted it to be live in that moment, and this was the first free app that I found that I was able to really kind of test it out and play with it, and it worked really well for me while I did use it. Another app that I use to edit videos is iMovie, and that's a free app for MacBook, iPad, and iPhone. What's great about iMovie is you can combine several videos together. You can add overlays like titles or lyrics and images. You can add background music, and then another function that it has is you can create a pre-recorded trailer, and so they have the kind of that template in place already for you to just insert different videos, and it makes this fancy little movie trailer for you. One of the limits of iMovie is that it only lets you overlay one title and one image at a time. So if in my videos I was able to use that live air action to overlay several images and videos, so I could have my logo in the corner, some lyrics on the side, I could change the lyrics to new lyrics, I could add pictures of instruments. On iMovie, you can really only do one of those things at a time. So that is a limit that it has. There is another app that I ended up using that's kind of like the fancier, much more expensive version of iMovie called Final Cut Pro. And I lucked out that my sister did some video editing for her job. And so because our family is under that Apple family account, she had already purchased Final Cut Pro and I was able to download it for free. It is not free or anywhere close to free. So it is more expensive for sure. But there are some really great things that it does, like being able to overlay multiple images at a time, which you're gonna see in just a second. So a typical lesson outline for me, my classes were anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how long the lesson in the middle was. And typically the outline looked like this. We would do our welcome, we would sing our hello songs. I have different hello songs that I sing for K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. And so I chose to sing most of them at the beginning because I wanted each student to be able to hear their song while we were together. So I would sing the hello songs. Then I would encourage the parents or the students watching to check in. Just like you did at the beginning of the Zoom call, tell me in the comments where you're from, who's here, who's in your music making crew. That way I could just see who was there today, because people will come in and watch, but by encouraging them to check in, I had that physical proof of where people were coming in from. Then I would typically lead into some kind of story time. We would do our main lesson of the day. I would end with a movement activity that was typically one of those Go Noodle or Cuckoo Kangaroo YouTube videos. And then I would always leave them with an at-home challenge, something they could do at home throughout the week. That was a music making experience. And then Peace and Love is our goodbye song. So I would end with Peace and Love, and then that would be the end of it. So I'm gonna show you a little kind of 2-minute preview of kind of the basic points of a lesson. Now keep in mind, this is week 8, which is the final lesson that I did for my students. And because it was the final lesson, I kind of wanted to go out with a big celebration. Now my friends would say that I'm extra all the time, but I will say that this lesson especially has a lot more added features to it that I didn't include in the others, just because it was the last one and the rest of my school responsibilities were over by the time that I did it. So I did have more time to make this a little extra special. The focus of this lesson was instrument families. And so I was able to contact a lot of my friends and to submit videos of them playing these instruments so I could show them to my students. I love bringing in guests to my classroom, but you never get a guest with every instrument in your classroom. And so I had this opportunity to use this video editing to include all of the instruments. And so I had friends submit little 30-second videos of them playing their instrument. And I had pretty much every instrument of the orchestra represented, which was amazing to see for my students. And then I also, you'll see a little bit that I used in my story time, there's some music behind the video. And I used an app called Novel Effect, which I know Ashlyn is going to talk a little bit more about, I think, in her presentation tomorrow. But Novel Effect is really amazing because what it does is it takes your video or your audio of you reading the story and it matches background music to go with that story. And so it's really amazing. And there's some great music books that are included as part of that app. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what that lesson looked like. At home. I'm Miss Lunderly, and I'm coming to you live from my living room, ready to sing, dance, read, play, and make music with you. Here we go. Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? How are you today? Our story of the day is Zin, 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 a violin. written by Lloyd Moss and illustrated by Marjorie Priceman. And it's brought to you first by Simon & Schuster Publishing. It's also brought to you by Novel Effect. The strings all soar, the reeds implore, the brasses roar with notes galore. It's music that we all adore. It's what we go to concerts for. A violin, a viola, a cello, a double bass, a harp, a ukulele, a guitar, and so many more that I didn't even name today. And get ready to hear from the string family. Is the brass family. Check out the percussion family. Hear what the woodwind family sounds like. And let's get moving and grooving one last time with our friends Cuckoo Kangaroo. Peace and love until I see you again. Peace and love till I see you again. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye, Miss Wonderly. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye, Miss Wonderly. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye, Miss Wonderly. Don't forget to wash your hands. Keep them away from your face. I'll see you real soon, making music in our space. Goodbye, friends. I love you so much. Thank you for making music with me every week. I'll see you soon. So, my original intent for making these videos was to reach my students, but what I didn't realize was by allowing these videos to be public on my public Facebook page was just realizing just how far they would reach. There we go. So, over the 8 weeks of my music lessons, my music classes reached 30 states, 6 continents, and 9 countries, including England, Austria, Namibia, Canada, Malaysia, Mexico, Slovenia, Argentina, South Africa, and Australia, which was incredibly overwhelming and just incredibly wild. And you'll see in the video, I had and encouraged, when I encouraged parents to check in, I also encouraged them to send me pictures and videos of their students participating. And so I got pictures from England. This picture down here is from South Australia, and they actually went back to class fairly soon after, I think they said they had about a week off, and then went back to their classroom, what seemingly looks pretty normal. And they actually were watching my music classes in their music class at school in South Australia, which was wild. And all of this was incredibly fulfilling and incredibly exciting. But as teachers, the most special messages are the ones that came from my parents and my own students. And this message came from one of our 2nd grade parents after my very first lesson. And it said, music class with Miss Wonderly on Facebook was the highlight of our day. When I tell you that we love our teachers at Two Lakes, this is why. She's created a Facebook and YouTube channel for her to do music with our kids. E was freaked out because she took a lot of the things from her classroom and set it up in her house. And E said, this is exactly like our classroom. He was so happy to sing all of his songs from class. And that's actually my student right there with his little sister from that very first day of our music class. And so I was not only reaching my students, but reaching their families as well. And what a great way to bring your parents into your classroom and for them to see the things that you're doing every day with your students. Now, these are all really great things that happened, but it did not come without its own obstacles. And some of those obstacles, like I mentioned before, included computer storage. I started off at the beginning with a computer that could not hold very much because of the amount that was already on it. So some of the ways that I combated that issue was I would either delete the video files as soon as I had posted them, or I would store them online using Google Drive and other things. And then, like I said, I also used my iPad to edit a lot of those videos instead. Well, I also dealt with internet connection issues. That first week was fairly normal. It seemed like things were going great. And then all of a sudden that second week, everyone was home. Everyone was using their Wi-Fi and my connection dropped instantly. And so as I was practicing for my live lessons, which I did often, I would, because these lessons were live, I did several dress rehearsals just to make sure that there would be no issues moving forward. And so those first 2 lessons, by the time I got to the 3rd one, I said, oh, this is not gonna work. I was testing it on Monday, my lesson was Tuesday, and my internet was failing me. So I ended up switching that week on lesson 3 to pre-recorded and edited lessons. I still recorded it in chunks from my phone, just like I was streaming it live, but then I would edit those videos together using iMovie and then I would stream the video itself live without having to be sitting in front of the screen myself and hoping that it was going to work. And which actually really helped, because then, even though that worked for a while, eventually one of the weeks my stream was disrupted. But because I had that video pre-recorded already in place, I was able to just upload that video straight to Facebook. We didn't get to do it live together in that moment. It didn't feel like a live music class, but the content of that class was still available to students because I had already pre-recorded it. Another issue you can't tell is my perfectionist tendencies. We stumble over our words all the time in our music class. I've stumbled over my words several times already today. But when you have control over what you're recording, it was really easy for me to say, oh, no, I messed up. Stop recording. Okay, start it over. Oh, no, I didn't say that correctly. Start it over. And there were some lessons in the very beginning that I maybe had to record 5 or 6 or 20 times because I just couldn't get myself to stumble over my words. And so that was a lesson that I had to learn, was in order to get these out in a responsible amount of time and not spend all day recording one lesson, that I had to just allow myself to slow down, which is difficult for me, and stumble over my words a little bit, because that's very natural to our students. They see us do that every day in our class. And that's something that I had to continually remind myself as I was making these lessons. And then finally, I realized as the lessons were moving forward, much of the content of my videos was aimed at younger students. Now I had 4th graders and 5th graders that still tuned in to watch, but because of what I was teaching and how I teach, a lot of it was very much aimed at my younger students. And so as our district moved into their district plan, keep in mind I had about 3 weeks of lessons under my belt before our district even made a decision about how they were going to handle the distance learning situation. So I started these that 2nd week of spring break just on my own account, and then the district came in. And so as we moved into the district requirements, I began to think, how was I going to also engage my older students, because much of what I was doing was aimed at my younger students. So our district, Putnam City, gave our students 2 options for their music time, or for their academic assignments. They could pick up a paper packet that was distributed weekly from each school front, or they could do the online activities. Now, unfortunately, music and arts were not included in those paper packets. They were developed outside of us, so our only option was to create online curriculum for our students. And so our district elementary music teachers got together, and we decided that we were going to work together as a team to put together assignments for the whole district-wide. And so there's a QR code that links to that website that is still live today, and you are welcome to go look at that. All of our lessons and activities are still there. But what we ended up doing was splitting the grades into pre-K through 2nd and 3rd through 5th. And each one of those groups was provided one instructional video that was put together by the teacher, and additional activity links, things like YouTube videos, boomwhacker play-alongs, rhythm activities, things that they could do to fit with the lesson. And then we are a Quaver district, and so Quaver is our curriculum, so we also included a Quaver SEL song each week that students could sing along to and learn. And so what was really great about this is that teachers were able to only complete one task for 1 week. That was their district assignment. And they were able to pick a task that matched their skill set and their interest. So luckily for me, the very first week of classes, our pre-K through 2nd activity was Steady Beat, which happened to be the first lesson that I taught with my online music class. So I was able to take that lesson that I had recorded, upload it to YouTube, and that was my district assignment, or the thing that I contributed to our district activities. However, on top of that, a lot of our schools and principals decided that they were going to also enact their own plans to help ensure that students were completing these activities and getting information from their schools. So on top of that, we also had our school activities. And so our school finally put together a communication system for our parents, and we ended up using Class Dojo. And so this is a communication and classroom management tool that our school had not used up until this point. And we were putting this all together from our houses and not being able to ensure that parents were getting on as they could. So each classroom teacher was responsible for enrolling all of their parents and students into their class on Class Dojo. But instead of inserting all of our specials teachers into each individual 25 classes, what we did is we set ourselves as school leaders. So when you enroll for Class Dojo, you can pick a school leader, teacher, I don't remember the other options, but as the specials team, we enrolled ourselves as school leaders. That way we had access to that school feed, which is kind of like a Facebook feed for Class Dojo. And so we were able to post things on that school feed that could be viewed by anybody that was enrolled in our school's dojo. And so there are two different things that we posted. The first is our principal asked us every Monday to leave a video message for students. And so that was one video that combined all of the specialist teachers who were wishing students well, kind of giving them a preview for what the week would look like, and just encouraging them to participate throughout the week. So I put that video together for my team. They each sent me a little 30-second clip telling the students they missed them, getting them excited for the week, and we would post that every Monday. And that's kind of this preview right here. You can see what that video looks like. And then we also posted daily activities, and we have 5 specials that the students rotate through regularly. And so each specials took a different day of the week to post their own activities. And you can kind of see a preview of mine here. I would include a link to a Google document, which I'm going to show you in just a second. I would include a link to our district activities to make sure students knew where they could find those, and then leave my email and encourage students to reach out to me and to send me proof of their work. Now, none of this was required. We weren't assessing anything. We were just encouraging them and trying to give them some things that they could do at home, but it wasn't required by any means. Another limit of a school leader on Class Dojo is that students are not able to easily directly communicate with us, whereas in their class on Dojo, they can easily submit assignments to teachers and send them things through there, but as school leaders, they can't really contact us. So the only communication we could do was through email, which was a little difficult, especially trying to send videos and things that way. But our specialist team each took a different day of the week. So this is what the graphic looked like that we sent out to students in the beginning. Monday was computers, Tuesday was art, Wednesday was music, Thursday was PE, Friday was STEM, and those are the regular classes that they rotate through, but we still had some other things like library and ESL that are on our specials team, and so they posted things kind of randomly throughout the week, but they didn't have a set day in that schedule like the rest of us. And so we would make sure that our images were, that our activities were posted around 9 a.m. and encourage, like I said, students to submit their proof of their work back to us. We started off with, I mean, nowhere near like enough, and it dwindled off as the time went on. So, but it was exciting to see that some students were participating, and we would just hope that more participated than were showing proof of it for sure. And one of the ways that we encourage students to send in proof of their work is that we would include a slideshow of those pictures and videos at the end of our welcome message for the next week. So on Monday, when we sent out our team message, hi students, here's what you can expect. Check out what these students did last week. So that way they could see their friends participating and encourage them to continue participating throughout that next week. So here's what I did on Wednesdays. We had Wonderly Wednesday, which fit perfectly. And I decided that in order to engage all students that I was going to do a choice board, because once again, I couldn't make everything fit each individual grade, but by providing a choice board for students, I was able to give them options and they could pick the things that interested them. And I put that together using Google Slides, and you were able to add all of these images on top, and you can also take those images and turn them into a link. And so I have kind of a description on how to do that on the side. I will also say YouTube University is your best friend. That's what people call it. Because there are a lot of YouTube videos already out that tell you how to do these things and walk you through step by step. So if I don't give you every detail, one, you can definitely reach out to me or definitely check YouTube. That's how I learned a lot of the things that I've been doing. But you'll see that there are 9 different choices for students. This top row stayed the same every week. I always provided a link to my latest music class. I recorded myself singing some of our favorite songs that we sing in class every week so they could have that sing-along experience with me. And then DJ Wonderly's Dance Jams is my DJ alter ego. And that was a link to our Spotify playlist that I use at all of our school dances. So they had access to that. They're all elementary appropriate. And they're also public on Spotify as well. So if you search for Katie Wonderly on Spotify, I have several elementary appropriate playlists available that you're more than welcome to use in your classroom. And then these 6 down here kind of rotated each week. I had a composer of the week, I had a song of the week, and then each week had a different story that went with it. And then these other 3 boxes kind of changed depending on what the theme I decided I wanted that week to be, or the activities I wanted my students, but I tried to vary the activities so that way there was always something interesting that they could do, or they would have options to choose. And then, like I said, I encouraged them to check out the district website, to watch my live Facebook videos each week, and then to communicate with me through email if they wanted to send in any of the things that they were doing. So that was all this year. We had 8 live classes, 5 choice boards. We ended up doing a virtual talent show as well, where students sent in videos and I combined them using iMovie. But that was that year, and now we're moving into this year. And I really honestly don't know what this next year looks like. In fact, I texted my principal yesterday and she said there has been no communication regarding next year. Yeah, they're meeting fairly soon, but we really don't know what next year is going to look like. But as I've been thinking through and looking at what other teachers have been doing and looking at all of these discussions, it really feels like it boils down to about 3 different possibilities. And one of those possibilities is that we'll be teaching from a cart. They talk about how, you know, I have 650 students in my school, and it would be better to have a few adults rotating through a class of 20 students than 650 students rotating through the same class. So I don't know about you, but I have never taught from a cart before, and it seems a little bit daunting, but luckily there are teachers who have been teaching from a cart for a while. And one of those teachers has a website called Music on a Cart. Now I just checked this morning, and of course, after I've made this slide presentation, her site is currently down right now and she's putting it back together and reconstructing it. So if you click on this link or go to that QR code, it's going to say that there's nothing there. She is on Instagram if you look up Music on a Cart on Instagram, and she is currently putting her site back together. But once she gets it there are a lot of great resources that she's shared. And one of the things that she shared were 3 things that you need to think about before teaching from a cart. And the first thing is thinking about your schedule, right? I have in 55 minutes to see each class, and sometimes there's not even a 5-minute break in between those classes. There's occasionally is, but sometimes it's back to back to back. Well, now all of a sudden we not only have to think about those class times, but we have to think about the time it takes to get from one class to the next. What does the layout of your school look like? Are you traveling from one end to the other? Are they right next to each other? So you have to think about those transition times as well. We also have to communicate with our teachers and our administrators. What are the expectations for us? Then what are also the things that we need to feel successful in that class? And part of that is building relationships. I have a really good relationship with a lot of the teachers in my building, and I have no doubt that if there's something that I really need to make my time in their classroom successful, that they will do their best to work with me. But that also came from the relationships that I built with them in years past. So it's not going into their room and demanding that they do these things, but it's really working together to figure out how to best make their space work for us as well. Now, I can't expect them to move every desk out of their room and scoot it all to the side so we can have music in the middle, but we can work together to figure out how to best handle this situation. And then finally, we have to think about our vehicle. What is our cart going to look like? What are the things that need to fit on the cart? Or what kind of storage are we gonna have? Do you need electrical hookups for your cart to hook up speakers and other things? So these are just some things to think about. Like I said, I don't have the answers, but I found this article helpful in trying to figure out how best to manage it. So we could be teaching from a cart, but we could also go back to teaching from a distance. And the 2 programs that my district is having us trained in through our technology training is Google Classroom and Seesaw. I personally, like I said, did not have to do any synchronous or really asynchronous instruction with my students this past year. So I am not super familiar with every function of these programs specifically. I do know that tomorrow, Ashlyn Dickinson, her presentation talks a lot about Seesaw. So I encourage you to come back. She's got some really great tools on using Seesaw and Google Classroom. But another music teacher and curriculum designer that I found online, her name is Victoria Bowler. She has released an article on F-flat books, which took me 3 weeks to realize that F-flat books was a pun for ebooks, which I think is hilarious. But it took me a while to realize that. But she wrote an article on F-flat books talking all about Seesaw and providing tons of examples of ways to use Seesaw for music literacy, music improvisation, assessment, all of these really great things. So I encourage you to check her out as well, and then come back tomorrow for Ashlyn, who has a lot more information on using Seesaw and Google Classroom. And finally, there is a chance, a small, very slim chance that we could be actually teaching from our music rooms this year. I'm still not convinced that that's gonna be my situation, which is a little bit sad, but there is a chance that it could happen. And again, lucky for us, there are music teachers all over the world that have already gone back to their classroom. This specific teacher, her name is Krista Chincharik. She teaches in Hong Kong, and I found her through Instagram, Miss Krista's Music Room. And this is her back in her socially distanced class. Each student has a mask on. They're in their seats that are 1 meter apart, and they're dancing and moving in their space, but they're still moving and enjoying their music time together, which I thought was really impactful. So some things to consider if we're back in our physical classrooms is using chairs, sit spots, tapes, carpet squares, whatever you can to divine those individual student spaces. Perhaps we're using body percussion instead of real instruments, so you're not having to disinfect instruments between each class. I heard some other music teachers talking about using individual student kits. Perhaps each student has their own scarf, rhythm sticks, shaker, whatever it is that they can take with them to music, use on their own, and then take it back to class. I definitely think that we need to keep students moving. We can't expect them to just sit in one spot, but our movement is going to look a little bit different because of social distancing. And then you can also use individual technology perhaps for more student-driven learning. We're lucky that Putnam City has one-to-one iPads. I know that's not the case for every district, but there are some really great things that you can use with technology where students are able to kind of control their music learning as well. And finally, with any new thing, we have to rethink, readjust, and rehearse these new procedures to ensure that we're practicing safe social distancing with our students. So this is one pandemic that we're currently facing that has caused us to rethink and reevaluate how we teach music. But you may know that there is another widespread issue right now that's also causing us to reevaluate our pedagogy and re-examine the content we're teaching, and that is the national exposure of systemic racism with our students. Now, I teach in a student body that is 85% students of color. And so it has always been really important for me to make sure that my students feel represented in my classroom. I can't expect them to want to pursue music in the future if they don't see themselves reflected in the content that I am teaching. So one of the ways that I love doing that is through picture books. I went to a PD earlier this week with an educator named Matthew Stensred, who said that picture books can be a mirror or a window. Mirrors shed light on students' own experiences, and windows illuminate that new insight. And so we can use these picture books as both a mirror for our students where they can see themselves reflected in what we're learning, but we can also use them as those windows where they can get a look into other cultures and others' experiences, so they're not only committed to the things that are happening inside their bubble. So, like I said, I love using picture books in my classroom, and I, in fact, read a book every week with my students that's either related to the lesson or related to an activity that we're going to do or the things that we're talking about. Some of the books on the screen are some of my favorites that I use in my classroom. There's also a link and a QR code to my Amazon storefront, which is a list of all of the books I have in my classroom. And like I said, I left some of my favorites at the top where you can have direct access to those as well. During this time, there are so many things to consider. And I know from personal experience, it can all be very overwhelming. There's so many things that we have to put into play as we're moving into this next year, not only related to our student experiences, but through COVID-19 as well. So one thing that I would say is that we can't be expected, and you shouldn't expect yourself to overhaul everything all at once. Take it one step at a time, one lesson at a time, one book at a time. And luckily for us, like I've said many times before, there are a lot of other music educators that are already doing this work. I am not the authority in this, I'm simply an ally, but there are other educators that have already been doing this work and have already developed a ton of resources. One of the most impactful PDs that I went to was at OMEA a couple years ago when Andrew Ellingson came. And we were doing, it was I think the Saturday morning workshop, and we were supposed to sing the song Shoe Fly Don't Bother Me, and he had already put it in his lesson, it was in the packet, and we got to that moment in the presentation and he stopped. And he said, you know what? I had this song in here, it was included, but just last week I read an article that talked about that this song is a racist song, it has racist roots. The shoe fly is not talking about a fly. And he said, you know what? I had to have this conversation with my students last week. I had to sit down and say, you know what? We've been singing this song every single day for the whole year. But once we know better, we have to do better. And so we won't be singing this song today and we won't be singing it again. And he said those words to us in that presentation. And that really spoke a lot to me, is we might not have known better before. And that's okay. We don't have to feel bad for the things we didn't know. But once we do know better, it is our responsibility as music educators to do better. And so these are 3 educators. I offered links, QR codes to their websites where you can find more information about anti-racism resources and ways to make sure that all students are represented in our classroom and that the content that we're using is appropriate for them. So I want to leave you with this final call to action. If we were able to uproot and adjust our pedagogy in a matter of days for COVID-19, we can and absolutely must do the same for our students of color. So thank you so much for listening to me today. You can find me all over the internet. These are just a few of the places. I post primarily teaching resources to Instagram. I'm also on Facebook. All of the lessons that I recorded are on YouTube. I have a website. Like I said, those Spotify playlists are there. I'm on Teachers Pay Teachers, and then recently started creating GIF stickers for social media. So I'm also on Giphy as well, but that's where you can find me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Katie. We have a little bit of time left and we have almost 40 people in here. So if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box and we will get to them one by one. We'll try to move through them quickly so we can answer everyone's questions. Something that I want to share with you all that you might have been wondering about is that if your school isn't one-to-one, or if you are and they sent home devices and then your students didn't have internet access, so it didn't matter, Superintendent Hoffmeister is working to get internet connectivity better throughout the state. And I know she's ordered 50,000 Wi-Fi hotspots to be distributed to school districts based on their needs. And then she's been working with companies to try to get things wired in communities and get internet to students. So that is happening. So if you happen to have to go back to distance learning this next year, you might have better luck reaching your students with those devices at home if all of this gets taken care of in advance. So hopefully we won't be so limited to just paper packets next year, but we'll see. So many unknowns. Any questions? Also, something that all of you should keep in mind, if you normally don't have much of a budget for your classrooms, your classroom budget should not be purchasing wipes, hand sanitizer, masks, gloves. The school districts received CARES Act funding for all of that, so they should be supplying those things to you. So if you were planning on maybe using mallets and you need to wipe those down in between classes, you should have wipes from your district to do that. You shouldn't have to go beg for those from parents or anyone else. That should be supplied from the schools. The slides from the presentation and this video will be on the OSDE Fine Arts website. So I will get those uploaded here in a few days. The video is going to have to go on YouTube, and so our tech guy has to do that. It takes him a little bit of time to turn it around, but we will have it there. Other questions? It's great to see so many people on a call in the summer. Yes, so Sherry asked about the upcoming school year. I should have mentioned this. So 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I had a meeting with all of the presidents of the various professional arts organizations around the state, including OKMEA, OCDA, OBA, Green Country ORF, Central Oklahoma ORF, and the Kodai educators, and the string teachers. I think that's all of our music groups. And they are working with their boards to contribute to some guidance for music education for next year. And that information will be in the phase 2 State Department guidance that will come out in mid-July. So we're working on getting things together right now, and then that will be released, we're hoping the week of July 13th, I believe. So if you saw the phase 1 guidance from OSDE, the fine arts section was real small and short and brief because I didn't want to commit to anything before we have the research study out about aerosolization that's coming from the National Federation of High Schools and NAFME. So once we have that research and better information, then we'll be able to give you good guidance on what we could expect for the next year. The techie stuff. Ashlyn's presentation tomorrow, which I think, is it tomorrow morning? Let me check. Don't want to say wrong. Yes, at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. She has a lot of tech tools. And so she could lead you through some of that tomorrow. And then also we have a director of technology in the curriculum and instruction department at the State Department. And she's pretty amazing. And she just let us know that she's going to be doing a series of just short videos focusing on different tech tools for teachers. So like Screencastify or Seesaw or Kahoot or Flipgrid or, you know, all the different things out there. So she's going to start creating those, and those will be available on YouTube. And I'll try to get links to those as she creates those and send those out to everyone so that you have access to them. Because I think a lot of us, before this, we weren't real familiar with any of these tools. So that will be available in a few weeks. Let's see here. The questions. Okay. All right. Well, Katie, do you have any other thoughts?
I don't think so. Thank you guys again all for coming. And like I said, feel free to reach out to me through social media or email. If you have any more questions, I know that this recording will be available again as well, and with all of the details with the handouts. So just let me know if you have any more questions.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for coming. We will get this up on the internet just as soon as we can. So have a great rest of your week.